Welcome. This video is documenting the prediction that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head and then go into a long vegetative state on July 26th, 2026, and that the stock market, the stock indexes will crash heavily on August 18th, 2026. It'll be like a black swan event, like a Black Monday, for example, in 1987, or a Black Thursday or Tuesday in the 1929 crash, that sort of thing. That's what's predicted for August 18th. In fact, it's predicted that there will be a drop of 13% in one or more of the stock indexes, the main three. Dow, S&P 500, or most likely, I think, the NASDAQ. So this particular video is just discussing this one particular sign that is revealing these predictions. This road rage death of a famous boxer. Okay, this email was composed, as you can see, on July 19th. This timestamp, if you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I'll forward this to you. But also, the post date of the video proves this prediction is being made ahead of time. And no, I do not have an inside connection at all of the platforms to somehow, I don't even know how it would be done, alter the post date. Okay? Okay. Now, this prediction is quite precise. We don't really need an explanation to prove what is meant to be proven with the prediction. But the reason here, this prophetic sign, the reasons that I'll be discussing in the video here, will be clearly from God, supernatural. No human being is creative enough to come up with these connections and these reasons for how this prediction is known. And when the prediction comes to pass, it will prove the righteous Christian God of the Bible, the God of Israel. And it will prove the controversial things that I'll be saying in this video. And there is no debate, zero, no discussion at all regarding these controversial things that I'll be discussing. I know far, far better than anyone, including you, the reason and purpose for this prediction. The reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction, or these predictions. And it is to prove the controversial things that I'll be saying. It is not for you to go, oh, cool, neat, you were able to know this ahead of time. That's not the purpose of the prediction. We need to prove these things, or God needs to prove these things, and this is the purpose of prophecy. 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy for the purpose of proving it by God, to prove that it is His inspired word. And the disciples recognized that Jesus is or was the prophesied Messiah through His fulfillment of prophecy, which is Revelation 19:10 at the very end of the book tells us that. All right, so I was making a fantastic message and it just got cut off. So I don't know what I've said already, and I'm just going to have to just go with it and perhaps repeat myself a little bit. I don't know. But this video is about this particular sign that occurred involving road rage and the death of a famous boxer. Okay, and so because God commanded His disciples to watch for the signs of His prophetic return. For the signs of His return. And if you ask the average Christian today if they could name one single prophetic sign, they wouldn't even understand the question, let alone mention the most obvious one that's in the Bible, the Star of Bethlehem, which preceded the first coming. Who recognized it? The wise men. And who will recognize the signs of the second coming? Well, the wise people, those who are watching, those who have obeyed the commandment to watch. And there's good reason for watching, and it's because God is communicating things through his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. The truth is, the vast majority of the prophetic signs, the thousands of them, have been missed completely, including by those who claim to be watching. And that's because what hasn't been appreciated by others is that the full intended meaning of God's prophetic signs cannot be properly understood without their context and connections with the other prophetic signs. It's the same with the Bible. The Bible is not a linear document. One can take an infinite number of pathways through the Bible, and what makes the Bible amazing is that it is all interconnected. That's what makes it amazing, is that it is all interconnected. It's all overlapping, and this is what gives it the signature of God. It's the hand of God is on those that know the Bible. Those that have looked into it can see his handwriting all over the Bible because of its interconnectedness. But it's the same with God's prophetic signs. In isolation, just like any verse in the Bible, it cannot be fully properly understood. It is through the connections that God's prophetic signs can be understood. And this is what reveals the many myriad of other prophetic signs that have been missed. Like, for example, this particular sign in this video. I'm quite certain that this will be the only place in the entire world that this prophetic sign has been recognized. But it was recognized immediately. It's one of the top stories on the Drudge Report today. But we have known for a long time, first of all, that Paul Simon is very important in God's signs. And Paul Simon is known for a famous song called The Boxer. Now, the boxing is about hitting one's opponent in the head. It's predicted that Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head. Okay, and this head injury will be symbolic of what is coming, which is demonic possession through people's brains, which is symbolized by Revelation 9:11. And that's why Paul Simon symbolizes 9/11. He opened the first broadcast of Saturday Night Live after 9/11, cold opened with his performance of the song The Boxer. But again, not only did he open 9/11 and is therefore symbolism, or open after 9/11 in New York City, which is where the show is broadcast from, but it hints at Revelation 9/11 because it's boxing, which is about hitting the head, which leads us to demonic possession through people's brains, triggered by frequencies, which is what music is. The music, or rather the frequencies, will trigger the transistors or whatever that will be self-assembling in people's brains after they've been injected into them through the mark of the Antichrist, the VACCINE, which will then engender delta brainwaves and facilitate demonic possession. This is why Paul Simon is one associated with 9/11 and boxing. But this is why his most famous album, his best-selling solo album, Graceland, the title track, the music, the song Graceland begins with, famously, the lyric, "The Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar." Mississippi is the 9+11th state. Paul Simon famously dated Shelley Duvall and famously broke up with her at the airport as in Portal that the demons crossed through, as described in Revelation in Revelation 9, symbolized by Revelation 9:11. he broke up with Shelley Duvall at the airport, as in Portal, before she flew on a flight to the UK to film the movie The Shining. The movie The Shining is about demonic possession. Paul Simon also famously performed at Jimmy Carter's inaugural ball on the date January 19th, 119, which hints at Revelation 9:11. He sang his song American Tune, which includes a lyric about Apollo 11, and he sang about Apollo 11 9 days before Stephen King released his book, The Shining. The album Graceland is about the mansion that was owned by the king of rock and roll. Revelation 9:11 describes King Apollyon, a term for Satan, who leads his fallen angels out of the pit of hell. The mansion is on the fifth semi-prime number of acres. This is all Revelation 9:11 is in the fifth trumpet, and people are, as described in the prophecy, demonically possessed for 5 months. But Stephen King released his book 9 days after Paul Simon sang about Apollo 11. On the date 119, which hints at Revelation 9:11. Okay. Road rage, which is what this sign is here, which is also why it was recognized immediately, because we already knew that something with Paul Simon is coming up. His predicted fall, specifically. We already knew that. So when this sign came up today about a boxer, a famous one, well, that's immediately recognized as something to do with Paul Simon. And sure enough, it is, as I'll prove. And road rage is symbolic of the demonic possession, because this guy did this road rage as if he was demonically possessed, and probably he is, or influenced. I mean, probably he is. I mean, I read the article, and he has a history of violence and trouble with the law. So, yeah, he's probably got issues and probably demonic influences involved. But that's even more likely to be the case because this is a prophetic sign that God orchestrated. The road rage occurred in Texas. Well, I'm just jumping ahead now. Okay, so now I'm starting to get into the actual sign. But I'm just trying to explain how it is that because we've been studying his interconnected signs, his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, that we're able to immediately recognize these things, these signs, without even reading the article. Now, let's get into it. The boxer had a record of 8-1. And that hints at Paul Simon. Her one loss, by the way, is what made her famous, because she attempted to take on the belt holder, or the champion, the title holder for the lightweight division, I think, for women's boxing. Her one loss, anyway, so her record is 8-1. Well, that hints at Revelation 8:1, which describes the sound of silence in heaven that precedes the 7 trumpets of judgment. Paul Simon's hit, Sound of Silence, is what launched his career. And he says, actually, that he didn't write the song. He says that there are a few songs that he didn't write. They just flowed through him. They just came out. I don't know what term he calls it, but it's describing something like a channeling or something, right? Anyway, that's why her record is 8-1. It hints at Paul Simon. And the sound of silence, and that will also be symbolized, by the way, with Paul Simon's vegetative state, but was recognized that Paul Simon is symbolic of Revelation 8:1 long before it was realized that Paul Simon would go into a vegetative state. But when he goes into a vegetative state, it will be symbolic of a sound of silence. The sound of silence in heaven precedes the judgments on the world. And that's why I'm saying that when this prediction comes to pass, it is the sign that indicates the beginning of the end. I'll elaborate a little bit more here. He is going to slip and fall. Paul Simon also has a famous song, Slip, Slide, and Away. Slip, Slide, and Away. Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel have a famous song called America from their 4th album. That album is called Bookends. Paul Simon is symbolic of 9/11, as I explained. He opened the broadcast after 9/11. He also performed at the 10-year anniversary at the Ground Zero Memorial. He's also from New York City. But he opened after the broadcast. He opened the broadcast right after 9/11 to the world from New York City. Paul Simon with the boxer. He is symbolism for 9/11, which was the big warning from God for America to repent and turn back to God, or else judgment and destruction. This is explained in other videos and in other channels, including Jonathan Cahn's channel work. It was the big warning. The song America is on Art and Simon's 4th album, Bookends. The song Slip, Slide, and Away is on Simon's 4th solo album. There's a reason for the 4s, not to mention, and one reason is the 44th president is the Antichrist, which is why on 9/11, the 4th hijacked plane killed 44 people when it crashed into a pit that created a 40-acre pit because it crashed at a 40-degree angle, and the pit is 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh. And the pit is what King Apollyon comes out of and his fallen angels in Revelation chapter 9. Anyway, that's why the 4s. Also, bridge over troubled water. Bridge is the same symbolism as a door in God's signs here, and a door is the symbol of the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And Paul Simon is also Jewish. So, the 4th album, Bookends, and the 4th solo album contain America and Slip, Slide, and Away. In other words, when Paul Simon slips, slides, and falls and injures his head on July 26th, as predicted, it will be the bookend to the warning of judgment for America to turn back to God. The bookend is symbolic of the end of the period of grace and warning and the beginning of the judgments, the 7 of them that follow the sound of silence in heaven. This is why Simon's recent album is 7 Psalms. Paul Simon received a prophetic dream to make that album that he tells all of the interviewers. He had a prophetic dream and a voice instructed him that he is to be working on an album named 7 Psalms. He has a framed piece of paper that he wrote on after the dream. There's a date to this, January 15th, 2019. Paul Simon is predicted to slip and fall on July 26th, exactly 90 months and 11 days after the dream. And that connection isn't how July 26th was discovered even. It was known before that God was pointing to July 26th. It's just an astounding confirmation because of everything that I've already explained regarding Paul Simon and 9/11 and Revelation 9/11. Before we continue, I'm going to say that the fact that it is a woman boxer is an abomination. Women's competitive sports is a sin. And this is especially the case with women's boxing. This is an abomination. And I'm pretty sure that I'm one of the only people that are willing to be bold enough to say the truth. And I'm guessing that this is one reason why God has given me the voice to talk about this prophetic sign. And like I said at the beginning, I know far more than you or anyone the reason and purpose for these predictions. And it is to prove the controversial things that I am saying. I don't need to make another hour-long video explaining more and proving to you that women's competitive sports is a serious sin and that women's boxing is an abomination. Because the prediction proves it. That's case closed. That's it. Nothing more needs to be said. That's the purpose of the prediction. This isn't me. This is the prediction from God. And he's proving it to you through the prediction. And I know more than you the purpose of the prediction. Believe me, I know far more than you the reason for the prediction and the reason why God has given me a voice through the prediction. There's no discussion regarding these controversial things, which for many people aren't controversial. It's just controversial for those who are holdouts on these matters. And so it's time to end these debates and to be clear about what is going on. Okay, so she had 8 wins. This boxer was hit by the car in a road rage 8 days and fell 8 days before Simon's predicted fall and head injury, which will symbolize Revelation chapter 8. 8:1, the sound of silence, when he will go into a vegetative state. 8 days, Revelation 8, chapter 8. That's why she has 8 wins, and she was hit 8 days before Paul Simon, who sang The Boxer after 9/11. Boxing is about hitting the opponent in the head, as I explained. The killer is 31. He crashed his car into the boxer 31 days before the predicted crash on August 18th. The incident was in Texas. Paul Simon lives in Texas. We can assume that Paul Simon's fall will likely be at his home in Texas. Not only that, though, the location of, or at least the county, because the article doesn't say where it was just on a highway in Brazos County, but that gives us enough to make this deduction here, which is that Brazos County, according to Google Maps, is 135 miles from Wimberley, Texas, where Paul Simon lives. This is a very relevant number. Whether or not this is relevant or not, 135 is relevant to Paul Simon. But I'm not saying for sure that God intended this, but probably 135 is symbolic of Simon because Simon is symbolic of ships. And ships in the Bible symbolize America. There are those that say America isn't in Bible prophecy. They couldn't be more wrong. The ships in Revelation chapter 8 are symbolic of America because of the parallel with Isaiah chapter 23. By the way, the crash on August 18th is 23 days after Paul Simon's predicted fall. The biggest one-day crash in history was a 23% crash in one day, and I'm predicting that on August 18th, there will be something similar. It may be the day of the second biggest crash in history. One-day crash in terms of percentage. Because I think it'll be 13% that will crash on this day in one of the stock market indexes, probably the NASDAQ, if not the S&P or Dow. Anyway, back to the ships. Isaiah chapter 23 describes the ships that symbolize America, because ancient Tyre in this Isaiah chapter 23 is symbolic of America. Tyre was protected naturally by its surrounding ocean, and it wasn't until Alexander the Great built a causeway over to the island that this city-state was conquered. This symbolism is in context of, or Tyre is in context of the ships of Tarshish, and we have all kinds of evidence that Tarshish was referring to Great Britain, which was set apart and was powerful and protected because of its oceans, surrounded by oceans, set apart from the rest of Europe. This island state produced an empire on which the sun never set due to its ships, its navy ships and its merchant ships. It birthed America, which is why in this chapter we have a description of the daughter of Tarshish, whose power also lies in its ships. And so when the destruction of ships is spoken of in Revelation chapter 8, it is symbolic of America. This Revelation chapter 8, Isaiah 23 parallel is why, for example, the Washington, D.C. earthquake occurred on the date 8/23. And I'm only scratching the surface, and I don't need to explain anything more because the prediction proves the matter. It proves that I know what I'm talking about. The controversial things, including those that say America isn't in Bible prophecy, you are now 100% incorrect when the prediction comes to pass. I hope I'm clear. And I don't mean to be so forceful about this particular controversy. I'm being forceful because of all of the controversial things that I'm saying. Okay, so back to what I was saying. 135 is symbolic of all of this because this symbolizes America's ships. There were 135 spaceship shuttle missions. Why is that relevant? Well, there were two space shuttle disasters almost exactly 17 years apart. They are commemorated on the same calendar date every year because of this. The two space shuttle disasters 17 minutes apart are the reason why the two planes, which are ships, crashed into the two towers 17 minutes apart. All of this pointed to Apollo 17. Paul Simon, like I mentioned, sang about Apollo 11, about a ship, a spaceship. That lyric about Apollo 11 is in the direct, immediate context of another lyric, which is about the ship, the Mayflower, which was the spiritual founding of America. America was spiritually founded with ships. Furthermore, ships are symbolic of the gospel. And America was founded on the gospel of Christ. That's the spiritual founding of the Pilgrims and the Puritans. They saw their crossing of the Atlantic as analogous to the Israelites' crossing of the Jordan River into the Promised Land. And like the Pilgrims, or rather the Israelites, the Pilgrims were escaping the king. Not the king of Egypt, but the king of England, and political persecution and religious persecution, just like the Israelites. Okay, so that's why ships symbolize America. America is symbolized by ships. And 135 is fantastic symbolism for this. Also, this is, by the way, why before the Iran war with America, it is said in the media that 135 ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz on a daily basis. It points to America and the 135 space shuttle missions, which were spaceships. Okay, so that's why the boxer died 135 miles from where Simon lives, because Simon symbolizes ships. Simon sang again about Apollo 11 and the pilgrims in the Mayflower. And not only that, he sang that at the inauguration of the president in the year 77, which I won't get into why that's important. But anyway, but it was Jimmy Carter, and Jimmy Carter was a symbolic beginning of judgment. With his malaise speech, etc. Okay. Lots of things happened, including the beginning of the Iran war. Okay. And speaking of the fourth album with Garfunkel and the fourth solo album, communicating America's opportunity to repent, having slidden away. If I didn't make that point, I don't think I made that point. Yeah, the opportunity has slidden away. That's why they bookends the fourth albums, 4 and 4. Well, the 444-day Iran hostage crisis and the attempt to extract them, the hostages, the 4 times 4th prime number of them, in Operation Eagle Claw, involving 4+4 helicopters, 4 of them being destroyed essentially by dust because of the Habub storm, etc., and them landing in the planned area of Iran, but surprisingly landing in dust, ankle deep, just like Apollo 11 surprisingly landed in moon dust that created zero visibility. When they landed in Iran, there was zero visibility because of the dust. All of this hints at the coming attempt to extract the nuclear dust from Iran, after which will be when it is predicted Iran will sink America's ships. I think 3 of them, which will hint at the 3rd of ships that's described in Revelation chapter 8. The 4+4 helicopters also led to the disaster in which 4+4 military personnel died and 4 were injured. And this was during the 444-day Iran hostage crisis, which coincided with Jimmy Carter's final 444 days in office. Yeah, Jimmy Carter's a big deal, and Paul Simon sang at the inaugural ball, and he sang about ships. And he sang about Apollo 11 9 days before Stephen King released The Shining, on the date 119, which ends at 9/11. I'm repeating myself now. All right, so let's get back to where we were. Okay, so the killer's name is Charles Medina. Medina in God's signs is symbolic of demonic power, or demons. Okay, whatever. And that's because, well, the city of Medina, where the Prophet Muhammad is from, Islam literally means submission. If you don't know that, that's what it literally means, Islam, to submit. It's all about submission to who? Satan, of course. I mean, Muhammad himself, as described in the Islamic holy book, at first didn't believe that his encounter with Gabriel in the cave was anything other than a demon, which is why he tried to kill himself twice by throwing himself off of the mountain before his wife and his friends told him, no, it wasn't demonic. It wasn't a demonic encounter. You are a prophet. It was Gabriel. That's all true, by the way. I'm not making that up. You can look it up yourself. I told that to a quote-unquote Muslim who didn't know his own book, and then he looked it up right in front of me and found what I was talking about. And had to humbly admit that, well, you were right. Anyway, that's the symbolism for Medina. There was a famous racehorse named Medina that was disqualified from the Kentucky Derby, and Bill Gates, as in the gates of hell, is living in Medina, etc. Okay? All right. So, I forgot to look into it, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a connection to Charles Manson, which hints at mansion. And Graceland is about a mansion. The King's Mansion, which hints at King Apollyon. The King's Mansion, by the way, is in Little Egypt, the area of the country nicknamed Little Egypt, in Memphis, which is named after Memphis, Egypt, because the king of Egypt, from which the Israelites escaped, is a type for the Antichrist. The 44th president in Tennessee is the 4 times 4th state. As I said, road rage hints at demonic possession. No doubt he was demonically influenced. And I mentioned this. Paul Simon performed The Boxer to open the Saturday Night Live broadcast after 9/11, which hints at Revelation 9/11 and demonic possession. The Boxer, this famous one here, was killed on a Saturday. Saturday Night Live, when Paul Simon sang the Boxer, which is why this famous woman boxer was killed on a Saturday. All right. I think that is it for this video. God bless. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.